Vocês não precisam olhar para cá, podem olhar para as pessoas ali.
Bom dia a todos, é um prazer tê-los aqui. Eu sou Roberta Cox, do GWEC, Global Wind Energy Council. Nós estamos aqui no pavilhão junto com a IRENA e Global Renewable Alliance, lançando a campanha do Double Down, Triple Up. A gente pretende ver e identificar quais são os maiores desafios em diversos países, como em regiões como na América Latina, quais são os desafios que a gente tem para conseguir atingir esse objetivo de triplicar as renováveis até 2030 para combater as mudanças climáticas. Então, esse tema e essa mesa é extremamente importante, porque na América Latina a gente tem esse grande desafio de transição confiável e mais robusta para conseguir triplicar as renováveis até 2030. É um prazer tê-los aqui e muito importante que esse tema, que os países coloquem os seus objetivos, seus targets de triplicar, porque é uma campanha muito bonita, mas agora a gente precisa colocar na mesa quais são as ações para a gente conseguir atingir isso até 2030. Então, bom debate para todos vocês e obrigada pela presença.
Muito obrigada, Roberta, por essas palavras. Realmente, quando pensamos em fazer esse evento aqui no GWEC, tinha uma segunda intenção, e a segunda intenção é mostrar que se nós não aprendermos a operar uma rede de forma sustentável e integrar as renováveis nessa rede, nós não chegaremos ao objetivo de Triple A. Então, tinha dupla intenção. Eu vou apresentar os meus colegas de painel. O painel será, para quem nos vê no YouTube, será uma mistura de inglês, espanhol e português, bastante democrático como língua, e demonstra quanto variada é a América Latina e quanto variado é também o nosso esforço para colocar isso de pé, para colocar o Triple Up de pé. E eu vou apresentar, então, vamos ter aqui no nosso painel a Heloísa Borges, que é diretora da EPE, da Empresa de Pesquisas Energéticas do Brasil, o Ramon, que é do IVE, Uruguai, a Luísa, que é do México, é do ICM do México, o Baitelo, também brasileiro, do Instituto do IEMA, do Instituto de Energia e Meio, Ambiente, e temos aqui também o nosso colega Martin, da Argentina. Um painel bastante diverso para a gente discutir quais são os desafios e o que está por trás deste tema. Então, a gente vai primeiro ter uma conversa, cada um colocando a perspectiva do seu país, quais são os desafios realmente para colocar as renováveis na rede. E eu acho, Heloísa, que seria interessante até começar com você. Eu vou na ordem assim, tá? Antes do painel, a gente tentou combinar uma ordem, mas vamos na ordem circular. Heloísa.
Bom dia a todos. Should I switch to English or? Well, good morning, everybody. Great to be here. I'll speak in English because my Spanish is really, really bad. And I think Brazil is a leader and a very great example already of having renewables into the energy matrix. The Brazilian energy matrix, as you may or may not know, it's in energy is almost 50-50, 48% renewables, 52 fossils. But when we look in electricity, electricity is around 90%. Last year alone, we had 92% electricity was renewable, including hydro, solar, and wind. And that's a huge debate. If you account nuclear as renewable, then the share goes a little bit up. And I think the interesting part of the discussion is to understand that to include more renewables, you have to bring something to guarantee security for the whole energy system. It includes understanding new ways of operating the system. It includes, as Rosana mentioned, thinking about expanding transmission, because when we think about fossil fuels, you can choose wherever you're going to put your power plant, or it's easier, it's more flexible. When we go and look at solar, wind, hydro, you have to go where the resource is and then bring the electricity back to the load center. But more than that, it implies it requires us to think about new ways to operate a system that it's more and more and more diverse. When you think in Brazil with solar distributed generation and wind variability, you have to have something to back up the system. You may do it with thermal power plants, including CCS, if it's possible. In the Brazilian decarbonization scenarios, we account for that, but we count with the carbon capture and storage technology to reduce emissions from the power plants that are needed, or some kind of battery storage. I think each country has to figure out which is the best way to double down, triple up, while guaranteeing security for the system.
Great, Luisa. Thank you so much. Mr. Y.
Well, yes. Well, in
If
fact,
you can present yourself again in the
I-
proper way.
My name is Ramon Mendes. I've been for a couple of administrations, Secretary of Energy of my country, Uruguay, then Secretary of Climate Change, and then in the first sector for the last years, working on how to help making the region more renewable, how to help doing the energy transition over the region. My point is perhaps to show what happened in Uruguay. So I have a bad news and a good news. The bad news is that it will be impossible to triple the share of renewables in our mix. The good news is that we have 98% of renewables in our mix. And this is perhaps one of the most interesting points, because the good point is that we have almost half of our electricity coming from intermittent sources all over the year. About 40% of electricity in a regular year is just wind. And biomass about 15% more or less, then solar, and then hydro, which is there, of course, to help. But the good point is that we have succeeded doing this without any single battery storage, any single water pumping or whatever, just because we work very, very, very hard. It's perhaps the most disruptive point in managing the system, operating the system in an absolutely different way than the traditional way we do it in all over the world, particularly in our region. We used to have also a hydrothermal system with half hydro, half fossil fuels plant, and we almost displaced all fossil fuel plants. They are just 2% right now all over the year, in putting intermittent sources. So the question was how to manage how to plan first and how to operate such a different system. And this is perhaps the most important point. Now in Uruguay, the total installed capacity, just wind plus solar, equals the total peak demand of the country. This means that when we have a windy and sunny day, 100% of electricity is coming just from wind and sun. And we don't use water. The use of water is absolutely different than the traditional one hydrothermal. Of course, we had a brand new software in which is embedded all the probability of occurrence of different weather scenarios based on a century of historical data and weather forecasting. So, for example, the system knows with a week in advance, which is the amount of wind electricity and solar electricity we're going to have with an error of less than 20%. So this is crucial to understand how to put a price to water when you have to use water. And perhaps the interesting point is that we don't have such a big amount of water reservoirs as you may think. I mean, we are a small country, of course, but just to put some figures, we have not more than 600 megawatts of hydro power with reservoirs, 600 megawatts. And with that, we succeed to manage 2 gigawatts of wind reserve. So this is possible. We have been doing this for the last 76 years in 2017 when we finished the transition, and it works. I mean, of course, the most important point, the most important comment is that, I mean, there's no way of making an energy transition, thinking that we just have to add renewables in the grid. This is not the point. The point is that you necessarily need to redefine absolutely the way you plan the system, the way you operate the system, and last but not least, perhaps the most important one, how to design the market. Because in our case, spot market is almost zero. There's almost no spot market because almost 100% of the demand is under contract, under long-term contract. So this is also another very interesting point, because I can tell you in 10 years from now, which is going to be the electricity cost of the country, production cost of the country. Then the bills is another point. But when what is the production cost, it's fixed because 100% of the demand is under contract. So this is the kind of things that perhaps we can discuss a bit more. But the point that I would make is not just adding renewables, but it is possible. It works. Planning the system, and perhaps one couple of last comment. First of all, the production cost has been sharply reduced. Our production cost right now is $5 cents per kilowatt hour. This we have increased it by almost half. And when we have wet year, we have a Niño years, instead of 5, it will be 6. And instead of being 2% of fossil, we can be 6% fossil. I mean, very, very, very dry. Well, we can continue.
It's a very important point that you bring, that it is possible to go and target being 100% renewable or close to 100% renewable.
Let me point out about that. Going 100% renewables in Uruguay, this will increase us. Because in order to get 100% renewables, we need to put batteries, for sure. But if you are really 2%, if we succeed to do that around the world, it's not going to be that bad. So, in fact, we are not going to be 100% renewable in the following, let's say, 10 years. This is not our goal. Our goal is to maintain this 98% renewable. But the most important point, once again, is that the way you operate the system, the way you plan the system, is absolutely different. And perhaps we can talk afterwards concerning the grids, but we have used the same grids because we are introducing renewables in the mid-tension grid. So what we are doing is that's changing the flux of the electricity, flowing through the grid. And so this was also a way of planning quite different than the
It is. And of course, what we bring is that we have to rethink how we operate the system and what is the regulatory framework that is behind it. Some of the concepts that we used in the past is not applicable anymore. And this is exactly what we are seeing also. Now I'm talking as a Brazilian. Also in Brazil, it's something that applies very much to what we see. But I'm really curious also to hear the Mexico perspective, Luisa. What can you tell us? This huge country that I was there some weeks ago. It's a wonderful country as well. So just let us know.
Sure. How much time do we have?
5 to 6.
5 to 6 minutes. Okay. The Mexican context, I would love to describe it as Ramon, but unfortunately, we would have to go back, like in history, we would have to go back with our reform. And in order to talk about transitions, in my experience, you need to go to review history, right? So the point from where we are and the current situation of our system and the installed capacity that we have and the demand that we have. So we cannot compare, for example, the countries of the region that do have smaller demands from the one that we have with the two regions, etc. So with the energy reform that we went on in 2013, a lot of changes were happening, not only in oil and gas sector, but also in power sector. And in the power sector, the sector was liberalized. And the reform went through 2013, but then in 2015, we started seeing all the power sector changes, and the things started to be better, like to going towards an energy transition. The transition was not perfect, like the reform of the regulatory framework, of course, it was not perfect. In my opinion, for example, it lacked of incorporating the social justice of an energy transition. But as it was effective for reducing the electricity prices. And in the design of the market, because Ramon was saying the importance of having a market, but I would say also a regulatory, like a strong regulatory framework, and I will address that later on. I would say that it allowed the penetration of basically all the renewable energy that we have. We have around 12 gigawatts of renewable energy, just variable energy, right? Solar and wind. In terms of generation, for example, clean energy, because in our law we have like this definition of clean energy. So clean energy in cogeneration, it's considered a clean energy. It's around 30% of generation, right? Unfortunately, since the current administration took office, that reform, that old reform, was entered like into paralyze the system. We went through like at least 4 attempts. I could say like 5, it depends on the last one. But it started like regulatory changes or measures up to like a change in the constitution. That didn't went through. But if we're talking in a panel about what are the challenges, I would say the challenges for Mexico, unfortunately, these last years has been to defending the energy transition, the regulatory framework that we have. And in that, I would say the way you design the market and the way you design the regulatory framework, it's really important, because when a political perspective or ideology comes that is different or that is threatening the regulatory, like the energy transition, if you have a robust system that will allow it, won't be perfect and it won't solve all, but it will give you the instruments to defend the energy transition. So many actors like private sector, civil society, academia, etc., we were like trying to mobilize everyone, and from, for example, I think we were producing like technical analysis, etc., to defend. But if we wouldn't have like that regulatory framework, a strong regulatory framework, the transition or the history will be a different one. It's the current situation that we have, it's not perfect, but it's something that we can build upon, right? So right now, like the challenges that I'm seeing, is next year we will have elections. So the system right now, it's in a critical system. We are seeing alerts every single week. So what happened that? Not every single week, but like every 2-3 weeks, there are like alerts. And what we are seeing is that, like, the problem is that no additional capacity, generation capacity, has been added into the system. Not at all, because the system was paralyzed. The pandemic, it was really, really tragic, but in terms of the system, as it paralyzed and controlled the demand or the demand growth, then the system wasn't compromised. But if we wouldn't have the rate of the growth of the demand, then the history would have been different. But now, right now, the growth in demand, it's around 2.5, 3%, it depends, but like average, it's rounded 3% yearly. And right now, the demand is growing. We need additional capacity. But the whole market is paralyzed, so we do not have market instruments to penetrate the capacity. Renewables are an opportunity, not only because of the goals that we have, and we can be happy that after 5 years of this administration with really different narrative in the political context, now the political narrative changed a little bit. And right now there's more opportunity, or at least in the narratives and in the commitments of advancing towards penetration of renewables. That's super good news. Mexico at the last minute signed up the agreement of triple up and double down. But last year, for example, we got an updated NDC. We can speak about it more because it was like a whole process of civil society, government, etc. But they updated that NDC, and additional to that NDC, a commitment of additional, well, no, by 2030 to reach 40 gigas of renewable energy was added to that compromise. So it's quite aligned with the triple up because we are right now at 12 now. So it's even the triple up for Mexico. If we want to compare the metrics, then it would be even less than it was already committed. So that was something that you need to sign it because, well, you already committed that, right? But I'm just giving a lot of this into but I'll go back to the history about challenges. So right now, like what we need is how to open again the market, how to use the instruments that we have. So reactivate the market itself, the system itself, but also the confidence in investments, because a lot of confidence was lost, given the things, given the forward attempts of the administration to backtrack. So there now, in terms of transmission, there hasn't been investments in transmission. So we did some analysis and numbers, and we find out that we need to invest in order to leave the situation, like the current situation or the current system that we have, just to solve the problems that we are, congestion problems that we are seeing today. We need to invest from next year to 2030 around $4,700 million per year, just to leave the transmission system as it is needed for that year.
For the 40.
Yeah,
for the 40
gigawatts. And up to now, from 2030 to 2060, it's another history, much more investments are needed, right? But just for leaving the system with that capacity that needs to be added. So it's a huge challenge. But transmission, the investments and the profits that we are seeing, for example, in the subsidiary of CFE, which is the Federal Electricity Commission, are not being invested into the system, are being invested in other lines of the Federal Electricity Commission, even though we have a reform that opened up and split the commission into subsidiaries. So that's a really, really important thing to look at and start seeing what are the opportunities. If it will be private, it will be only public investment or what, but the investments in conditions are like key for going forward. Now, when we are speaking about like not just the NDC, but in a long-term scenarios, and Ramon was mentioning this, like planning instruments is really important to do. What we are seeing, for example, we proposed a net zero emission scenario, right? And in the power sector, we run long-term planning analysis, but also hourly analysis. And what we find out is that we need to start right now, not only investing in renewables, but start seeing what will we do for phasing down and phasing out fossils, right? So what we find out is that coal can live out or can be phased out in a just manner by 2030. In Mexico, we only have 3 plants of coal, right? So it's feasible, technically, socially, etc. But we also have thermal power plants that use fuel oil. So what we find out is that it's also feasible if we phase out those by 2035. But in order to achieve that goal and the 2060 goal, because we believe not only transmission, but we need to start reducing the dependency of natural gas. So we need to get rid of coal, we need to get rid of fuel oil, and now gas. Gas right now in our matrix is around 60% of the generation. So it's a huge dependency. And there are 12 plants to be installed by the federal government, right? In the plans or the planning instrument. After those, it's like 2027, the last one. If we want to comply with the commitments, then no new investment are needed in our system, not new fossil fuel based, but also we need to start investing. That's a tricky way to say it, and I really want to be careful about the role of natural gas, because now the power, the dependency that we have could be helpful in phasing out all other fossils, and with the pickers, start balancing the system and penetrate renewable energy, right? Variable renewable energy. But also we need by 2030 to start phasing down the generation with that, start adding storage. And also what we are finding out is that the role of green hydrogen could, but I want to also be careful, could play a role. Because given the extension of the country that we have, given that it can solve, for example, certain curtailment moments, so we can, and the technology might be, by 2040, ready to start, if you start reducing gas, then 2040, around that, start reducing much more gas of thermal, of combined cycle, for example, plants, and start introducing green hydrogen, towards a net zero generation system. But many things, not only to fix, and I will conclude with this because I have taken a lot of minutes, but I'll conclude with this. Many things need to change right now to solve like short term and fix the paralysis that we have been through. But also we need to start seeing or planning the regulation that we need for storage. For example, that there is no regulation for storage. We need to start taking decisions about investments, for example, in green hydrogen, that it's not even a real topic right now in the public debate. So if we want to be in the long term net zero, we need to start right now with many decisions, not only the short but in the long term. So
It's quite it's quite interesting what you bring here. Is first how fragile, even how fragile this whole thing is, if you do not have the right mindset, a state mindset that makes it the long run planning. It's really fragile according to the government in place. So apparently you had something starting and then a whole new mentality came into place. And now what I hear is that we have to invest a lot in transmission. We have to plan. We have to do a lot of things in order to be net zero in 2050. That is our commitment. So I think this is more or less the same for everybody. But you brought a very broad view on Mexico. Thank you so much. So I'll now pass to Ricardo Baitella from IEMA, if you can introduce yourself. I think you have an interesting perspective on that, also from Brazil, so it's an interesting perspective also from our country. If you, the floor is yours, Ricardo. If you can talk a little bit louder, just for the...
Ia falar também para ficar um pouquinho mais em U, porque algumas pessoas não estão aparecendo. Yes, more near. Aí, um pouquinho mais. Pode chegar mais próximo dela. Vocês também. Mais próximo, porque ele não está aparecendo. A mais em U pode. Aqui fica juntinho, mas aqui não fica. Aê, perfeito. Começa de novo. Yeah. I mean, it's
Go ahead.
Começa, por favor.
Okay, thank you, Rosana, for intermediating this meeting. Thank you, GWAC, for providing the space. I'm very pleased to have access to the sharing of experiences in both Uruguay and Mexico. The challenges are much more similar than I initially thought, and I have the benefit to be sharing the space with Rosana, so I'm going to bring a few elements from Brazil, and I'm sure she's going to be able to bring more elements, and so that we can make a summary of the discussion. So, talking about about the experience for Uruguay, we do have a similar reality where we already have quite a big share of intermittent sources. Right now our matrix is 220 gigawatts, and out of those 27% are intermittent, wind, solar, and especially distributed solar, which is already 35 gigawatts of the total. And it's growing pretty fast. It grew 60 gigawatts in the past 2 years, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that we just can keep it growing and not do the homework that is needed for us to have a stable, reliable, those are the main words that we listen. Stable, reliable, cheap system. And at the same time, we do have the regulatory framework pretty much in place for wind and solar. We do have a free market option where energy can be hired if there's no government auctions. But at the same time, we do have a Congress that is more and more interested in planning as well. I could say, and please, Rosana, correct me, in the past, we had a more predictable planning process in the executive power, but now, in the past 2 years, we have to monitor the Congress because they have a lot of ideas, different ideas for the energy transition or regression, as some people say in Brazil. So right now, what we have been watching is this discussion is critical because the more we integrate intermittent and renewable sources, the less there will be space for thermal fossil fuel generation that is going to end up in stranded assets in the next 15 or 20 years. So what we're seeing is, even in the case of green hydrogen, there are amendments coming up to include coal generation. And 2 years ago, there were amendments that turned into law to include inflexible gas generation, which means waste of hydro and waste of wind and solar that are cheaper and are already higher. So I'm being pessimistic, but I'm generally very optimistic. I think and then I'm not going to be long because I think we have a lot to discuss. We have been having this discussion with IEMA and Institute for quite a while, and we were able to connect the main points that are needed between experts from the sector and the academy, and basically there are very similar points relating the model, the evolution of the model, to be able to foresee, even though Brazil is facing a period of low demand, why we need to keep hiring more renewable energy and maybe intermittent energy to be able to counter droughts, which are a threat in Brazil. When those droughts come, then what comes next is the threat of immediate solution, which is thermal plants. We also need to speed up the regulation for storage. There are interesting projections that say that storage, with the right conditions, storage systems are going to be viable in the next 3 to 4 years, even more viable than gas thermal plants. So it's a mixture of also redefining prices and let's say equalizing prices, because some sources are more subsidized than others. So we need a transparent system where we're going to be able to move in the right direction and also be able to hire capacity, not only hire energy at all times, but be able to hire capacity and address the system in a more strategic way. So those are the main points I'm glad to come back later.
I have little to add, but I wait my turn here just to add something to what Luis and you said on Brazil, and to draw from your experiences. I'm really, really happy to hear from Argentina, our closest neighbor. And as we have a joke there in Brazil, everything that happens in Argentina will happen to us in sometime in the future, or vice versa.
But you have Bolsonaro first.
Yeah, or vice versa. And so I'm really happy to hear what's going on in Argentina.
Thank you, Rosana.
Sorry for the joke.
Yeah,
I had to do it.
Don't
It's our dear neighbor here.
we will not talk about football.
No. I'm for Argentina. No, we're not.
Okay. Thanks for the audience, for Chihuahua, and to share this meeting with my colleagues. Argentina, I'm Martin D'Apello from Renewables Energy Chamber from Argentina. Argentina is the third important market behind Brazil and Mexico, Latin America. No? And when we talk about the electric grid in Argentina, we need to know that we have more than 15,000 kilometers of high voltage lines. So it is not easy to manage a system with so kind of distances. And we produce energy in sites very far of the site when we have the demand of the energy. So it's although our system is very robust, we don't have transmission problems. Actually, we have 43 gigawatts of installed capacity. In renewables, we have 0.5 gigawatts installed, and most wind energy with 3.5, and then 1.5 gigawatts of solar energy. And the total renewable energy represents 14% of our electricity demand. By law, our objective is to reach 20% at 2025. Now the Secretary of Energy put a new goal to 2030 to reach 30% of renewable energies. And then we have the long-term strategies that we have to reach 33% to 2050. So I think that it is possible to make the commitment to triple up the renewable energies in Argentina. But it is important to highlight that despite the adverse conditions of the macroeconomic situation of the last years, like in Mexico, renewable energy will slow down. The investors slow down. Now our bottleneck are the high voltage lines. We don't have so much high voltage line to develop more utility scales renewable energy. So in the short term, we have to work very hard in distributed generation because we have to use the lines of low and middle energy. And in long term, we need a long-term strategy. We have to wait and we have the expectations about the new government. But the problem is that the high voltage lines, you can't develop thousands of kilometers in short time. It will take 4 or 5 years to develop, I don't know, 3,000 kilometers of high tension. So I think that that's our challenge, how to increase the renewable energies without high tension lines. To understand about how many money we are talking to meet the goal to 2025. We need $6,000 billion, and to by 2030 we need more than 10,000 billion to reach the goal.
How much? Sorry?
10 billion. 10 billion.
10 billion.
10 billion.
Wow.
So it's not easy with the macroeconomic conditions actually in Argentina. I agree with Ramon that we are working and thinking energy at the same way that we used to do 100 years ago. I think that the renewable energy have the challenge to change the legal framework, but not to adapt the actuality that we have. I always say, if tomorrow will appears the cars that fly, we can continue to use the same legal framework because the cars now fly. So we have to change and think and develop another different kind of legal framework because now we are just trying to fix it on and how manage the delivery of the energy, how to manage the consume of the energy, and we have to understand that renewables came to change everything. So I think that we have to talk about rationalize the energy. I know it's very difficult, but I think that we have to start the game again.
Yeah, it's quite a challenge. $10 billion. Let's see, and definitely transmission lines there in Argentina are going to be key for you to have all the wind energy, for example, from Patagonia reaching out to where the demand is. So it's I can see the challenge.
More than 50% of the demand is in Buenos Aires.
It's in Buenos Aires.
Yes. We generate energy in very far sites in the country, and we have more than 600 of distributed companies.
Whoa!
614 distributed.
How to coordinate all this?
And you have 614 different prices.
614 different prices.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah. So yeah, quite a challenge.
Yeah.
And also, in order to have any kind of stability in the system, if you do not have those two areas interconnecting to itself, it's kind of impossible. So just adding something about Brazil before going around, and then I'll do specific questions here. Taking what Eloisa said and Vitalo said is that Brazil is somehow, if we do change our regulatory framework and all the framework that dictates how the system is operated, what are the commitments of each stakeholder in the system. For example, the hydropower plants, they do have to produce a certain amount of energy because they are fully contracted for that amount of energy. And EPE has to plan according to that, and ONS has to dispatch the hydro plants according to that because we dispatch by minimum price, which is the common way to do that, to deal with the system, not of the past, but this is how things are being done now, and we probably will have to somehow review that. And talking about system stability, if we manage to leave part of this hydroelectricity free for the system operator to use as a flexibility asset of the grid, this is good, but we have to change the operational framework. And I agree with Thiago that I was talking to him. Thiago is also from EPE, and Eloise is also from EPE. We were talking to him that probably we will have to rethink if we want to have a grid that is that we use the current installed capacity of thermal plants, because there is no meaning in phasing out that right now, because we use money from our society to build that thing somehow. So we use that in a phase down way, using some CCS in the need, but then we've changed the framework so that we can operate without needing that much of storage, some storage, but not that much. So just adding to what you said, what we see is that there is a need to rediscuss the regulatory framework and adopt this framework for a new reality that is a car that flies. It's not a car with wheels, normal wheels. It's not even an electric car. It's a different one.
Yeah.
So this is what I had to add to what my colleagues here said about Brazil. And Elisa, I would turn the work back to you. You mentioned CCS, and apparently in this phase out, phase down discussion that our Secretary for Climate Change just said that it's phase out, so how can we? What are the possibilities for CCS? How do you see this technology evolving? Because somehow, if some fossil fuel is left in our energy mix, it has to be with some kind of capture. So there are pros and cons to do that. I know you know this very well. She's the director for that subject in EP. That's why I'm asking you to just enlighten us. What are the pros and cons, and what can we do on that?
Well, as you all mentioned somehow, there are different challenges embedded in our ambitions. The first one is to balance what we do now to get the results that we want in the future, 30 years from now. Yeah. So which pieces we have to, which moves we have to make in this huge chessboard to get the results. It's very, very hard to do that because we make assumptions on technology pathways, on cost curves, in order to allow us to think this future and plan for it. Brazil, we just published in the beginning of the year a set of decarbonization scenarios for Brazil, where we mapped the most cost-efficient scenario, and then we mapped alternative scenarios. The alternative scenarios, what they do is they shift hypotheses on technological pathways. So in our scenarios, as you mentioned, CCS, carbon capture, is very important in two ways. First, in electricity, we honestly do not plan to phase out completely fossil fuels, especially because if we think we have to phase down, compensate, but if we think of the sheer amount of energy that Brazil has to include in its system and balance, by the end of this decade, we want to decarbonize while including at least 30% more energy in our energy matrix. By 2050, we have to be more renewable, but we have to at least double the amount of energy that the Brazilian population has available. So it's a huge undertask. Natural gas for electricity generation in our base decarbonization scenario, there's 2% only to balance the system, but it requires carbon capture, and it will phase out everything else. It's important to realize, I read a study that said that in the past decade, the main cause of emission reduction in the US was actually natural gas, because it phased out coal, fuel oil, cod oil. So it's a matter of adding less emissions the more you advance, and capturing what you cannot. In Brazil, carbon capture is also very important for the bioenergy industry to grow. Because if you use biomethane combined with carbon capture, we actually have negative emissions. And that's a huge deal when we think of all the sectors that are very, very hard to abate. So we need the negative emissions from bio-CCS combined with the use of biomethane that allows us to not be stranded on natural gas, because in our planning, we have a technological pathway that migrates from natural gas to biomethane, eventually gas mixes with hydrogen in the end of the period. But the idea is that when you do that, you do not throw away all the money that the society has already invested in the existing infrastructure But in order to allow for this strategy, we need the carbon capture technology to evolve as fast as we need them. What we are doing is we are picking up the research and development money from the oil and gas industry and directing the oil and gas industry, giving them instructions to invest that money, that research and development money, in CCS, in hydrogen, in energy efficiency, in batteries, in storage. That's the way we are going. In that way, you use the investment and research power and the money that's there at the table to invest in research and direct it to the technologies, to the advancement of technologies that we are going to need, we know we are going to need in order to reach our ambitions.
Great to know. And it's acting the double down on there, meaning investing in energy efficiency, that it's like the one that wasn't to be mentioned some years before, to something that will be in the global IEA analysis, 18% of the net zero contributions in the end. So it's very important. Energy efficiency and CCS somehow have to come to the table and be considered.
And that's why the Energy Policy Council will give this directive straight to the research
R&D money directed to that. Yeah. It's very good perspective. I would love to hear more from Uruguay. I've been only to the Uruguay at the border to buy some wine, which is really good, great wine. But I've never been to Uruguay itself. After what you said, this is the next country I'm going, because it's like the paradise for renewables, but because it was planned like that. What do you have also to enlighten us after the discussions with some ideas?
I have nothing to enlighten. Just things to share, nothing more than that. But let's become just about a couple of points. First of all, concerning finance. We got $6 billion investment in 5 years. And this for a small country like Uruguay is
a lot.
It's 12%. 12%. The size of our economy is $50 billion. And we got $6 billion in only 5 years. And this is why we had such a tremendous change in a short period of time. So this is possible, but you have to create the conditions. I mean, if we do not create the conditions, can we move forward? So once again, I mean, first of all, clarity. Renewables is completely different than traditional business. LCOE is just paying back your investment. I mean, there's no fuel to pay for. In general, you have all these marginalist markets because they are based on the cost of the fuel they're going to use in order to generate electricity. This is zero in renewables. And operation and maintenance is very, very, very low. So everything has to do to bring back investment. It's just a financial business, nothing more than that. So this is why de-risking is the most important point in order to develop this economy. It's just about de-risking, nothing more than that. And so you need a lot of financial tools in order to do that. And even Argentina has experience with that, with creating trust funds, creating international insurance. For example, the World Bank has developed insurance in order to decrease the money cost. So this is crucial, and also concerning Mexico, that and know very well, and other countries are also what happened in Argentina, what happened in Brazil. We need long-term policies that are backed by the entire political system. We cannot avoid changing energy policy each time we change government. This is impossible. It doesn't matter what a given government decides. It can be good or bad according to our point of view. But if they change, every time the government changes, it will be bad for sure. Whatever the decision is going to be. So we need long-term agreements. We need political agreements, and for that we need narratives, strong social narrative that tells us why the just energy transition is the best solution, not just because of climate issue, not just because of global issues, because at the national level is the best thing, because it decreases costs, because you are putting more sovereign renewable sources, even if you have oil and gas or even coal or whatever, if you add renewables, you're adding your native, your domestic sources.
Generate more jobs.
And then this is the first point is you're adding, you increase your energy sovereignty, you're adding more natural in-house resources. You are decreasing costs. You are stabilizing costs because you don't no longer depend on fluctuation of energy commodity prices, and you are generating a lot of jobs. In Uruguay, we created 50,000 new jobs, and we are only 3 million people. So this is 3% of the labor force. Make a calculation in your countries, how many people are 3% of the labor force? And this is what we created as jobs. So it has an impressive positive impact on the whole economy, much higher than anything else. So this is what we have to put in our national narrative. If you have a strong national narrative proving that this is the best solution at the national level, not only because of climate change, then it will be difficult for a country, for a government to change, to be against that, because this is something that is already accepted. So working with narrative is crucial. And once again, trying to understand that we need to do absolutely different things. Let's go back for a while for planning and operating systems. I mean, in Uruguay, everything turns around intermittent sources, because they are the key. I mean, once again, if we have enough wind and sun, 100% of electricity is just wind and sun. And this happened many times during the course of a week, many times. So all the rest has to follow that. Water has to follow that. You cannot avoid any more water just in market prices. You need, you need models in order to have, to keep, as we do, but in a different way, the cost of opportunity of using water as with an overall optimization of the system. And this discussion that we're having right now is the same that is going on, for example, in Europe right now. Spanish people has understood that they have to change regulation. Germans do not like, because this is a discussion in Brussels right now. It's to understand that they have to change from traditional marginalist system to long-term contract system. Has nothing to do. And the way you operate and use water has to change dramatically. And this is the way we succeed to be as high in renewables, in intermittent sources, 50% of the total mix with intermittent sources, because we use the rest just to follow the variation of the cheapest one, which has been the sun. So if they're the cheapest one, let's put them as much as we can, and the rest has to follow. There's no room for a coal plant, which is inflexible, and we have to use gas turbines, and when we have a lot of years without wind, then this is the moment when we put combined cycle, when we close the cycle. But otherwise, even if you don't have enough, for example, like in Mexico, even if you don't have enough water, hydro or reserve hydro, you can use a gas turbine. Gas turbine is on in 3 minutes. So it's very simple. So what they're going to do with the installed capacity that they have is already enough. We don't need more installed capacity. It's just to put more renewable energies, and then with the installed capacity we have is enough in a flexible way to follow intermittency of renewable energies, and that works. Believe me. I mean, go to Uruguay. You say that you're buying Uruguayan wines. You're also buying Uruguayan energy because we are exporting
to Brazil.
We are exporting energy surpluses. We are exporting as much as 1% of the GDP. Today, electricity for renewable electricity, it's an exporting good.
But we are buying from Argentina.
Yes, because
We're buying from everyone.
yes, the interconnection lines, the connection capacity. Not only the line, because we also need what's the name? Because you have 60
converters.
The converters. Yeah, sure. We invest a lot in the converters.
50 to 60.
50 to 60.
Yeah.
And so, you know what? We invested $500 million, $500 million at the Uruguayan demand cost, and we paid back this investment in 22 months. Just in selling electricity.
We are paying too much.
Yes, Sure.
No, I'm just joking. Sorry.
But this is just surpluses. So imagine the impact of having a
And
full
regional
integration on our grids. Imagine that. Imagine that. Because as we have different geographical situation, when there is wind in some place, there is sun in the other, and there's rain in the other. This is the way, for example, it works between Denmark and Norway. In wind they have wind. In Denmark they have wind. In Norway they have water. So they are sending all the time wind from Norway and water from Norway to Denmark. This is perfect. And this is what we are doing in a small country like Norway. Imagine if we're thinking in larger context, in larger countries or larger possibility of interaction. So once again, my last word. We have to understand that we have flying cars, and we have to think in absolutely completely different way. The way we plan, the way we operate, and the way we design markets. It's different.
That's your points are like the summary of what we have to do. It's really very enlightening, as I said in the beginning, because it is. And also, when you take into account about job creations, as you mentioned, when you take into account that actually Latin America has what it takes to be the leader of energy transition. We have critical minerals. We do have minerals. We have wind and solar, very good resources. We have intellectual capital, human capital, land, in order to deal with our bioeconomy, land without deforesting one single tree, fast growing.
Just biomass waste.
Just leading with agricultural waste.
Agricultural country, so we have a lot of organic waste. We have a lot of energy content. And then waste.
Yeah, sure. So we have what it takes, and if you go further from the production of the electron or the hydrogen molecule, if you take this molecule and this electron to decarbonize our industry, we will be able to supply the world with green products.
Absolutely.
And this is value added to a region that has been explored over and over again for primary resources.
Absolutely.
So probably we are in the verge, if we act correctly, we are in the verge of a new industrial area with some redistribution of the global supply chains. I know I'm being optimistic, but as a region, this is how we should be playing.
Let me say my last word, which is the following. Because what happened about trade in the future? For sure, we have barriers concerning our carbon footprint. So if we are a region that produces whatever we produce, whatever good we want to export, with low carbon footprint, it will be a panacea for the world trade in the 21st century. So this is, we have to think about the whole economy. If we decrease our carbon footprint, we will be entering a lot of markets much better before than other regions will.
But then that's part of what we're all trying to achieve here.
Yeah.
Because currently, Uruguay, but also Brazil, since we already have a low carbon footprint,
Exactly.
but there's no premium for that.
Yes.
But they will.
And also access markets that are being regulated right now, like CBAM. I was with Luisa. We organized a panel discussing on cooperation between Latin America, and we got to the conclusion that we have to have a Latin American CBAM. So Luisa. But this is a very good point. It's the key point.
Absolutely.
Who is paying for that? Your words.
My words. Like final words or?
Final words. We have another 11 minutes, so.
Okay. I think at utility level and like high level has been all discussed. I would just add, for example, at ICM we're really working towards like how to incorporate the just perspective into the transition. And I think it's something that we haven't come into discussion. And I think there's an opportunity, or we found out there are like certain opportunities of adding at least not only like the recognition of the social justice, but also like the redistribution of social justice. And for example, we are currently working in something that we call ejidos solares. Ejido is a specific agrarian land tenure in Mexico, right? So that specific land tenure, for example, has like a common area, and that's something that also happens in other countries in America, Latin America, right? So what we were trying to do is to move away from the governance. I'm not saying that it's one or another. I'm saying it should be working toward, like together, right? So I do agree, and I do believe it's super important to have like public and private investment in utility scale. But what I think is that we have been lack of incorporating new actors into the generation system. So it's not only about just living with or start incorporating these new actors to the distributed generation, but also to the utility level scale. But there are many challenges in order to do that, because as we are all saying, like renewables provide a lot of benefits. But if we analyze for like who is going to that profit at the end, no, it's like just, well, Argentina is another case, but like just a few actors into the system. So in order to provide with that, we have come with this idea. Why don't we start like proving at distributed generation, like financial new mechanisms that allow us later to come with a higher capacity? So what we have come with, it's how do we create, for example, this mechanism that allow the ownership of the community since the beginning and remains to the whole lifespan of the project, and the profit and benefits, direct benefits, comes to the communities. So these agrarian specific land tenures are quite far away from the urban centers, right? And those are the ones that are being affected first, because when demand grows in the urban areas, the ones that receive the shortages are the communities. So, and that is not considered in the electricity planning system. Why do we need to, I know like the logic of planning, right? But like the theoretical logic of planning, because that theoretical planning was not considering the justice component. So why don't we create a specific mechanisms for those communities in which generation is closer to the point of consumption? And
that positive externalities are not considered in the electricity price.
Exactly.
Yes.
Because when we compare natural gas with some price for megawatt hour and renewable, that price in megawatt hour, and without consider that externality, positive externality.
Exactly, and not even regulation. That's something that we are working right now, for example. But I'll try to like sum up. But okay, so when you have this, then the challenge it's different, because we are working like in a really high level. For example, in terms of financing, we're working and designing the instruments in this level. But now it's very few actors that are looking into this level, that also needs on how to do bankability the communities, right? So we have come, for example, on this, why don't we create this like a specific purpose vehicle where the subnational governments comes to do, like to provide the bankability to the community. Then why don't you bring the community itself and the private sector? And together, they do profits together at that community level, where the benefits are the return to the investment, if it's achievable, but also the direct benefit, the profit, but also the benefits of not receiving shortages or having stability, electricity, etc., etc. And in that, it's not considered in the planning system on the prices, but also in regulation. For example, in Mexico, we don't have a specific figure of regulation for communities. We only have a general regulation for distributed generation, but it's being it's considered as it is the same as having in an urban center, in a residential household, right? But the conditions, the technical, social, environmental, price conditions are super different because the reduce of investment that you need to do in order to connect that community into the grid and provide the service, then it's not considered. So the marginal local prices are not reflecting that. So it's just that it is important to say that social justice should be also added, and it's possible, and it's not something that affects the system or the economics of the system. On the contrary, it can, if well designed, it can benefit the whole system itself and all the actors.
Just as an example, in Brazil, we have just launched the program Mais Luz para a Amazônia, which is a program designed to do that, to include communities isolated in the Amazon region, providing them with an energy source that's cleaner, more reliable, and guarantees that they'll have inclusion, opportunities of growth, more dignity in their development. So it's just a suggestion. It's a very interesting program.
Yeah, because they run on diesel.
They run on diesel, fuel oil, and most of the time they have it costs a lot because the costs of the isolated systems are shared by the entire connected system. So there's a kind of a subsidy for the entire country, but still costs a lot for the country, and it does not give them the reliability and the benefits that a cleaner source would do. So,
and on top of that, the ironic fact, having diesel and oil powering the Amazon population. So, and I mean, it's a good thing if we manage to go that far with this project in Brazil. I'm really glad about it.
Yes.
So, Baitelo, we will be 5 to 6 minutes late. Okay, Roberto. Okay, Baitelo.
Okay, thank you very much. Once again, I'm very pleased with the discussion and happy that you brought the social justice part. I think we do have a very good map of what needs to be done in technical and regulatory terms. And we do have also similarities when we look at the strategy, when we look at the triple up, double down goal, that we do have a part of the population under constrained demand. So it's not just a matter of increasing the renewables, but also bringing those people at the table. And I've been taking part in a lot of discussions in this conference of social movements that are frustrated about their role and how we can be part of the system, can be heard, and suffering only the impacts of projects, but also being able to decide and take part in the planning. So this all means that I think we do have the map of the technical challenges, but we do need to bring everybody to the table, and we do need to do better advocacy. At least this was the point that we concluded in the convening that we had between IEMA and MIs in the past on integration of renewable sources. We need to have all the stakeholders on the table and be able to advocate better and have a common goal. And we need, the other important point here is we need to be able to communicate more, especially to the outside world, what it means and how we can get there. I think, as you said, everybody gains from this process. So this is part of the homework that I suggest here. Thank you.
Thank you, Baitelo. Yeah, for sure. Communicate better. And also, there is no free lunch, meaning any power project will come with some impact somehow. Solar will be bad for the Caatinga because you have to deforestate the whole thing. Wind has its issues, hydropower plants had its issues. And so it has to be an impact that is shared by everybody and kind of agreed by everybody somehow. And it's very true. This energy transition must not be another way of militarizing the way we take the decisions and just imposing from top down.
That's why diversity is the key.
Yeah, diversity is the key. Yeah. So, Argentina, my dear friend,
Yeah.
also good one.
One minute. And I agree that we have to work in communication, but I think that all of us agree that we have to decarbonize, we have to democratize. But as Ramon said, we have to forget that this is a financial business. So we have to change the first message is for investors that renewable energy is a good business. That's why the first thing that we need is to the decarbonization. But the investors don't think like that. So we have to convince them that talking about invest in renewable energies is a good business. And put the money first. I think that is the next step that we need in the region to get all the money that we need to develop infrastructure, to develop high voltage line, to develop distributed generation. Talking first about money, and all the things will happen because we know about, we know all the positive externalities that renewable energy have. But finance sector don't take about. So
Thank you so much. I think we got to the end of our section here. It was really a good discussion. I thank you so much, everybody. I thank you, Roberta, for opening the space for us to have the discussion. And I have a proposition after hearing what all of you said. I think we should come up with a white paper coming out from this discussion here, and somehow Latin America perspective, something that brings and summarizes more or less what we discussed here. I don't know if you all agree. We can touch bases with all of you, and we come up with a white paper that can also be part. GWEC can also be part of it, of course. And I think it's a document bringing a perspective that is very Latin American. It's very important for the rest of the world to take that into consideration and for us to better communicate.
And don't forget that Latin America have all the resources that the world needs about the minerals, the critical minerals for the transition.
This is our,
We didn't even get that.
Yeah.
We will need another 3 hours.
So I end up with an end note that I'm really happy for the discussion. Thank you so much for everybody. And with this note on the table, I'll look and I'll touch base with each one of you by our WhatsApp group. Sure. And try to come up with, for the beginning of next year, we start planning to have this report on Latin America, on that Uruguay, Mexico, Brazil, and Argentina, and if any other country wants to join, Colombia, for example, Chile. And I think it's to be a very interesting thing to have. Thank you again.
Let's think about sorry.
Oh my goodness, yes, we do have to. And G20. Thank you so much.
Okay.